think I will always think of this year that was, 5784, as the year when what it means to be an American Jew changed forever. We've all been asked to pick sides, to show our loyalty to our tribes, loyalty to the Jewish people, loyalty to the progressive world, loyalty to our families and friends and social groups. We've watched as the massacres of that day, of October 7th, as they unfolded in front of us. Hostages that still aren't home, rape as a tool of war, the slaughter of kids at a music festival. We've watched as Gaza has been leveled, as 40,000 human beings have lost their lives at the hands of the Jewish state. These are the sorts of numbers you read about in the Hebrew Bible, the last time Jews were sovereign. We've seen endless rockets from Lebanon turn the north of Israel into a ghost town. And we've all had an unceasing ping of news alerts on our phones telling us of pagers exploding, of airstrikes against Hezbollah, and of Iranian missiles raining down on Jerusalem, raining down on people that I love. Some of us in this room have found solace in candlelight vigils and mission trips to Israel. Some of us have held signs at ceasefire protests and on college campuses. Many of us, most of us, have felt increasingly alienated from Jewish spaces, from synagogues, from organizations that either felt too unsupportive of Israel or felt too warmongering. We've watched as the word Zionist has become a litmus test not just in the Jewish community, but in the American world. Some of us in this room live and work and play in spaces where to be a Zionist is a matter of pride, of connection, of identity, and where anti-Zionism is indistinguishable from anti-Semitism. Some of us in this room live and work and play in spaces where Zionist is a dirty word, and where identifying as anti-Zionist is a prerequisite to entry. Here in America, where we are safe from rockets and war, Israel and Palestine have stopped being real places with real people and have turned into something like sports teams, with all of us forced to pick sides to declare our allegiances. Cubs, like Rabbi Randy, or Cardinals, Packers or 49ers, Israelis or Palestinians. What I have been struck by again and again is that right here in America, right here at CRC, we are dividing ourselves up. Our community and our relationships are tearing apart over something where we have almost no power. I've spent a lot of time in Israel. I lived on a kibbutz up north after college and spent months in the hippest part of Tel Aviv with an Israeli friend's family. Karen and I met and fell in love during our year in Jerusalem, and we returned for our honeymoon. We have ripped our sleeping kids from their beds in the middle of the night when rocket sirens blared out. And I sat with Hirsch, Poland Goldberg's parents, just 6 weeks after he was kidnapped by Hamas. But the sad truth is, even if I could convince everyone here that what I say about Israel and Palestine is right, that my perspective is the correct one, even if all of us left Rosh HaShanah today understanding Israel exactly as I do, it would make no difference at all. No Israeli and no Palestinian would be safer or more secure or able to lead a fuller, more dignified life. Because one of the tragedies right here in American Jewry is that on this issue that we care so much about, we have almost no power at all. 42 years ago, at a moment not so different from our own, one of my Rabbis, Reb David Hartman of a blessed memory, wrote an essay sitting in his Jerusalem apartment that has continued to reverberate as Torah. Israel was at war in Lebanon, a war that came to be known as Israel's Vietnam. At home and abroad, Israel was met with protests and questions about its morality and legitimacy. Holocaust survivors were interwoven throughout the fabric of Israeli society and government. It was in 1982 when Reb Hartman wrote his essay asking Jewry if we were in a world closer to Sinai or to Auschwitz. When you were in Auschwitz, he taught, when you are powerless beyond measure and face the most existential of realities, the only ethical response is survival. There are no moral norms or boundaries or qualms that matter when every moment is existential. You do what you must. And so for Reb Hartman, Auschwitz becomes a stand-in, a shorthand for those moments of genuine existential threat that we each face in our own ways throughout our lives. Sinai, on the other hand, is a shorthand for those moments of real power, of real possibility. At Sinai, we stood by the side of a mountain, liberated from Egyptian enslavement, ready to receive a Torah filled with visions of the world that we could create. Sinai, our world, is complicated. Power is messy. After Sinai, the Promised Land turned into a place where we had to figure out how to build a society, where we had neighbors and tribes and politics with competing interests, contradictory demands. After Sinai, we lived in a world where we had armies and sacked cities and killed tens of thousands of women and children. Just read the Hebrew Bible. The moral threat, David Hartman said in 1982, was to mistake our moment today, a moment of Sinai, with the existential threats of Auschwitz. The mistake, he taught, was to confuse our present reality of power with our past of powerlessness. We are not a people who are dispositionally comfortable with power. For the better part of 2,500 years, we have lived as minorities and refugees at the whims of governments and capitals far from us in geography and in values. In some ways, powerlessness is all that we have ever known. Our literature, our values have been nurtured in this reality. We have thousands of years of musings about the obligations of the powerful and dozens of years of experience with real power. Complicating all of this is that it is almost impossible to speak about Jewish power without treading into anti-Semitism. Unlike American-style white supremacy, anti-Semitism doesn't imagine Jews as lesser, but instead as disproportionately powerful. Anti-Semitism is fundamentally a conspiracy theory where the answer to the why of why is the world broken is always the Jews. And so talking about us as leaders of industry, as driving forces of Hollywood and banking and media, discussing the incredible ways that American Jews have been able to be active and influential in politics, in academics and culture. It is hard to even talk about this without sounding like a white nationalist, or increasingly, like a whole bunch of Missouri state legislators. That wasn't supposed to be a joke. I teach a day-long class every few years at Eden Seminary on Messianism. Actually, it's about Star Trek and Messianism. And I was so struck sitting there with these future pastors, by how much we live in a world that looks like the messianic vision of our ancestors. 40% of us live in a Jewish nation state that, even though it is under threat, is thriving as an economic and cultural powerhouse, a state with nuclear weapons and the most advanced military in the region, a state which exists with the support of the greatest empire of the 21st century. And the other 40%, we live in America, where despite rising anti-Semitism, the greatest threat to Jewish survival is not violence, but instead that we have been so accepted into the fabric of American society that there are fears that we will be assimilated out of existence. If we went back to almost any moment of Jewish history, if we went back 100 years or 1,000 years and described our world, our ancestors would tell us we are living in the days of the Messiah. Every Tuesday evening here at CRC, I teach a class on Jewish history. And if there is any theme that has emerged in the 3,200 years that we have studied so far, it's that this moment, right now, is the single greatest time to have ever lived as a Jew. Perhaps we're just off the peak. But let us not mistake living in the late Golden Age, what David Hartman would certainly call a Sinai moment, if there ever has been one, with the existential threat of Auschwitz. Rosh HaShanah, these days of introspection and awe, are built on the belief that we really can change ourselves, and in doing so, change our world. Tshuva, this process of recognizing and bridging the gap between the person we have been and the people we can yet become. Tshuva demands that we see ourselves as powerful. I always get melancholy at the new year. I become so aware of the ways that I have failed. Failed as a partner, as a parent, as a child. The ways I have failed as a rabbi, as a friend, as a human being. This cheshbon hanefesh, this accounting of our failures and our weaknesses, is certainly a part of tshuva. But the danger is that when we mentally move from failure to failure, from trauma to trauma, our mindset shifts and we convince ourselves that we are standing at the gates of Auschwitz, when, my friends, we are at Sinai. If we believe that it is possible for us to destroy the world, the Bratslaver Rebbe taught, then we have to believe it is possible to repair it as well. We stand on the precipice of an election whose results will reverberate throughout our lives and our world. It is maddening to think of how little power we have to affect the result. It is maddening to think about how much less power we have on the governments and politics of the Middle East. It is hard, emotionally, to realize this. But when we let go of these comforting illusions, we can better see the places that we do have power. We are living in our ancestors' messianic dreams. We are at Sinai. But it is only when we stop fighting battles that we cannot win that we begin to see the choices that we do have. The choice to mend relationships, the power to affect humane, progressive policies in our workplaces, even if we can't change them in Jeff City. The ways we can change how we live, how we spend our time, even as medical and financial realities constrain us. The ways we can continue to grow into a version of ourselves that our ancestors and our descendants can be proud of. Shanah Tova, may this new year of 5785 be a year of sweetness, of healing, of growth, and of peace.